Cool, so in this part 2 of the close combat or melee, I'm going to go into how cavalry works. So, I know in the Napoleonic era, a unit of cavalry charging to the front of an infantry battalion would sometimes be very reluctant to actually charge into the front, but for the purposes of the game, we ignore this. So, how it works. Cavalry basically do everything exactly the same as the infantry. You measure from your command stand, any point on his base, to any point on an enemy unit, and that's your charge distance. So if you're about to be charged by a big unit of heavy cavalry like this, you have two options. Your first is to do closing fire and then get wiped out, unless you can stop the charge. If you stop the charge, then well and good to you, but if not, you are going to be wiped out. The other option you got is to try and form a rally square. So what you basically have to do there is you do a resolve test at -3 because you're panicking a bit and these cavalry are bearing down on you. If you fail, the cavalry will wipe you out. If you pass, then you can form rally square like this. So if you manage to form rally square like this, what will happen is the cavalry will move up, they'll have to stop 1 inch away from you, and they won't be able to complete the charge this turn. They can try in future rounds to try and charge you, but they will need snake eyes, double one, to be able to charge a square. And if they do manage to get a double one and charge a square, they will completely wipe it out. So when cavalry hits a unit formed up as normal, let me quickly form these up. So they hit that unit like that. What will happen is they just finish the move where that unit was, capture the colours, which you can either put in your own lines or you can have it running around behind the unit like that. And then everyone else will be destroyed. So obviously to avoid your units being wiped out like this, you need to try and put them in square before the cavalry get close. So let's say you have some light troops in some broken ground like this or in some woods. It's a good way to kind of take cavalry out of the game for a little bit. Especially if they're British, because if they're British, they're impetuous. And they will have to charge unless they can pass a resolve test not to. So, what will happen here, the charge reaction for these guys will be either to stand and shoot, which means they'll have to fight the cavalry. But they will get a cover save, obviously. Or they can try and form rally square in the rocks, but it's a little bit pointless. Or they can flee. And because they're light troops, they get no movement penalties at all. So they can just move their full move plus D6 out of the rocks. The cavalry will have to charge in. They'll hit that difficult ground and their movement will be halved, which means they won't be able to catch them light troops. So it's a good way. Just 1 second. She'll end up with something like that. So it's a good way to get that cavalry into that broken ground. It's going to take ages to extricate itself from there and get out again. In the meantime, you can just pour volleys into them with your light troops or some other troops or some artillery. And you can decimate them while they're stuck in that difficult ground. So it's a good way to pull cavalry out of the battle. A little tactic for you. So your cavalry's come across this French unit and it's going to attack it in its side arc. So if it hits, it's going to wipe them out. In the side arc, they will still get a reaction, so they can still try and form rally square. They can't shoot because they're facing the wrong way, but some lucky individual like him, for example, looks over and says, "Cavalry!" and they all decide to try and form square to stop themselves getting killed. Excuse me. Excuse hands. If they're going to get hit in the rear, they get no reaction at all, they just get dead. So let's say for argument's sake it's French player's turn, he wants to charge that unit of cavalry. He's just quite simply not allowed to do so. He cannot charge unit of cavalry to its front because they would just counter-charge him and wipe them out. So what happens if he comes across him in the side arc? So say he wants to try and charge this unit of cavalry in the side. They cannot countercharge, but what they can do is evade. They can just run away. They won't stand and fight a stand-up fight with infantry in the side like that, because they lose all the advantages for being cavalry. So they think, no, we'll just run away and we'll charge them next time. They can obviously evade, and then they can turn around and face the enemy. The same as when the skirmishers flee through the rocks. At the end of the move, they can turn back to face the enemy, because it's a voluntary flee, not a flee from failing a resolve test or something where you will be facing away from the enemy. There is, of course, an exception to this rule. So if this unit of British cavalry was disordered, then your French unit can charge them, because they're not formed up. They don't know exactly. They're a bit confused. So you can charge at them, and they will just evade again. They'll just run away. And I've done this so that if these, for argument's sake, are guarding the objective and they become disordered from fire, it'd be quite difficult then if you're trying to get them to move away with your infantry. So if they're disordered, you can just charge them and they'll have to flee. Cavalry charging other cavalry. So if they're charging to the front, as a charge reaction, so say these British heavies are going to charge into these lancers, as a charge reaction, they can either evade or they can counter-charge. So both units will count as charging for the purposes of who goes for the melee and stuff. And you work out your combat resolution as normal. So something I forgot to mention in the infantry close combat, but it's the same for infantry and cavalry. Everybody strikes simultaneously. So if you're playing a two-player game, for argument's sake, the lancers do 8 casualties. When these get to fight back, these 8 still count as being alive for that purpose. They can still fight, and at the end of the combat, you remove them. And that goes for infantry, cavalry, everybody. And of course, there is an exception to this rule, which is only for lancers, and that is lancers on the turn they charge get to strike first. So what that basically means is they'll do their attacks, and then the casualties will be removed, and they will not get to fight back. So that's a special rule just for lancers, but everybody else will fight simultaneously, unless there is a special rule or a special order that they can receive that allows them to strike first. So these British heavies, I've noticed that these French lancers are in, they're in the flank of these French lancers, so they can flank charge them. Their only option here, they'll need a resolve test to do it, is to evade. And if they pass, they can run away, and if they fail, they just get hit. And normal combat rules apply, so 2 bases, 2 supporting. Who'd get supporting? In fact, everyone gets supporting there. Just main 2 bases get full attacks. And these can only get these 2 attacks on the side. No supporting attacks because they've been hitting the flank. And of course, if they're about to get charged in the rear, because we all know you should never show your rear end to anyone, then they get no options. They just have to fight. And only these bases will be able to fight. And because they've been attacked to the rear, they only get half their attacks. So they only count as supporting attacks. So they're probably going to get killed. All the same rules apply for cavalry charging commanders. As I say, the commander counts as cavalry himself. He counts as light cavalry for movement distances. You can move him at any point, obviously. But if he is the closest target, he can be charged, so that they will be able to charge him. And his options are the same. Evade. He hasn't got a front or rear or anything. He always attacks to the front. He can evade, counter charge, and that's about it, really. So, cavalry charging a gun. The gun will get to react. He will be able to do closing fire as normal, only hitting on 6s unless he gets a special order to hit on 5s. He loads up with canister, so he gets 3 shots per gun, each doing D3 wounds with no saves. So if he can stop the charge, all well and good. So you can imagine if there's a battery of them, you don't really want to charge them to the front because they'll probably cause easily enough damage to stop your charge dead in its tracks. If your cavalry is charging into the flank or rear of a gun, they just quite simply wipe them out. And that'll be the end of them. So the final point I want to talk about for close combat with cavalry, I think this is the final part. If I've neglected anything, somebody let me know who's got the rules, is intercepting. So let's say, for argument's sake, these British heavy cavalry have moved up to here. They're now going to try and charge that square, that French column, and try and wipe them out before they get across the battlefield. So what will happen here is, because this French column has got some lancers for protection, because they expected there might be some cavalry about, strangely enough, what will happen is they'll get to do their normal reaction, which will be stand and shoot. So they'll be able to put some closing fire on these guys in the first place. Then these will move up to half their charge distance. Then if the Polish lancers have got enough distance to move there, so their light cavalry, the movement is 7, and then they'll get another 7 for their charge. They can even do this if they've already moved this turn, and even if it's out of sequence. So they will quite simply counter charge in. Let's just move them back a little bit. So they'll take the charge to try and protect that French column from being destroyed. So it's just a little, if you can get some cavalry close to your columns while they're marching across, it's generally a good idea. A little bit of tactical advice for you, because they will be able to intercept any charges. Obviously, they'll need to be able to see the charging unit. If these heavy dragoons were going into, heavy cavalry were going into the flank of that column, they're that side, they can't see them. So they wouldn't have been able to intercept on that occasion. And they have to have the movement to do so. But in most cases, if you position them well, you will have that movement and you will be able to countercharge and protect your column. Even if they lose, say they all get wiped out to a man, that'll leave the British there because they'll get a free refill. So on your next activation, you could just put that French column into square and that'll protect it from that cavalry. So that pretty much concludes the nitty-gritty of the rules. In the next one I'll get into saves, etc., stuff like that. Shouldn't be any more than 2-3 videos now, and it shouldn't be as long as these, hopefully. Yeah, sorry for waffling on, but I just wanted to make sure I got all the points across correctly. So nice and easy to understand. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.